Welcome to the Hugo winners of the 80s. Yay! This is part of my reading through the Hugo winners project by decade, and I'm releasing each decade in a completely arbitrary order, so please be sure to check out the other Hugo decades on my channel. Just like my other Hugo videos, we're going to divide this up into 3 sections. The first is going to be the context. This is what was happening in the world during this decade. Then we have the Hugo winners by year. Of course, we're going to go through each year and talk about what each book was about. And finally, we're going to cover my favorite books ranked. And of course, this is just my personal preference. Let's get into this. So the 1980s was just a crazy year, finally coming to fruition in the 80s. This is the era of mullets and perms, of big hair and high tops. We also see shoulder pads, jumpsuits, jean jackets, and of course, the iconic leggings with leg warmers and your handy headband. That's what I'm talking about. The 1980s starts off with a big bang. I'm talking about in 1980, we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. And in the global section, we have Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev working to officiate the end of the Cold War. We also have the Soviet Union looking inward and providing less support to its satellite communist countries. Therefore, we start seeing a lot of countries overthrowing or attempting to overthrow communist governments. We're talking Romania and Hungary, the Czechoslovak Velvet Revolution, and China's Tiananmen Square protest, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. We also have several notable civil wars, including Angola, Salvador, Uganda, the Falkland Wars, the insurgency in Laos, and the Ethiopian Civil War, which leads to famine and leaves the country completely dependent on foreign aid to feed its people, which is the rapidly growing favorite charity of this decade. We also have multiple Middle East conflicts and wars, leaving Islamism a major political power, and unfortunately, having lots of extreme jihadist groups set up shop, including Al-Qaeda. Now, the 1980s were also known for the AIDS or HIV epidemic. Everyone was afraid of the gay disease. HIV was tracked to starting in primates in Central Africa, and treatments were constantly being sought after.
Who doesn't want to wear the ribbon?
We also see the development of immunosuppressants transforming the lives of transplant medicine everywhere, as well as the very first antidepressant Prozac gets released on the market. We also see the very first artificial heart being used successfully, and we have, for the first time in all of human history, the very first successful human gestational surrogate, making it the first time that your biological mom does not have to be pregnant. Wow. We also see MRIs becoming widely available and an increase in the number of vaccinated individuals. We have the 80s being the golden age of the arcade games. I'm talking Pac-Man and Tetris and old school arcades. We also have the release of the home Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
Whereafter, we have kind of a crash or a plummet of home video games around 1983 until it is saved by Nintendo when they release Super Mario Bros., the highest grossing video game of the decade for sure. We also see games like Mega Man, Donkey Kong, Legend of Zelda, and we finish off the decade with the release of the personal Game Boy. Now, we also get the release of MS-DOS in 1981 and Windows in 1985. We have the infrastructure of the internet finally being set up and established. We have the very first modem being created, and we finally have searchable databases, especially for governments and libraries. Now, we also get the Apple's timed release of the Macintosh computer. It's the first successful home computer to use a GUI, or a graphical user interface, and a mouse. We're also getting the emergence of the compact disc, also known as the CD. Now, we also get the very first portable cellular phone that is launched on the Lunchbox network, and Motorola subsequently releases the Dynatac 8000X, also known as the Brick. And this baby was 3 whole pounds. This kicks off the race for a smaller, lighter, and more practical cell phone. We also get to see the Soviet launch of the Mir space station, the world's first modular space station that's assembled in orbit. We also get to see the Halley's Comet as it waves hello in 1986. And we see a ton of the space program advancing with the development of reusable spacecraft and shift from disposable launches. We also get to see the first American woman in space, as well as the first African American, the first capture and repair of a satellite, the first Space Lab mission, and we also have the tragic Challenger explosion with the loss of its crew, all due to a faulty O-ring. This tanks public opinion and risk-taking in the space industry. We also start to see TVs becoming commonplace, not just in first world countries, but in third world countries as well. We also get to see the consumer launch of the VCR that helps the growth of video rental stores. This secures the dominating win of VHS tapes over Betamax. Now, we're also seeing some awesome children's toys in this era, including Cabbage Patch Kids G.I. Joes.
Hey, an original G.I. Joe.
My Little Pony, Care Bears, BMX bikes, Rubik's Cubes, that glowworm thingy that you squeeze and it turns on, and also Teddy Ruxpin, the Koosh Balls, and Polly Pocket. We finally start to see parody film and music taking over at its height. We see people like Weird Al Yankovic really making tons of commercial success, along with Mel Brooks' Spaceballs.
When does this happen in the movie?
We also see quality movies like Airplane and Naked Gun, and it's the golden age of SNL, known as Saturday Night Live.
What you want, man?
Now, we also get to see technology bleed into the music industry and create synthesizers and drum reverb, transforming and making possible groups like Flock of Seagulls and the Eurythmics. We also get to see the subgenre techno begin to start in Detroit. We also see the rise of glam metal and groups like Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica, and so many more. And of course, we have to talk about the arrival of MTV in 1981, which changes the way that music is marketed. That's right, I'm talking about the music video. This paved the way for people like Prince, Cher, Journey, Whitney Houston, Madonna, and the second British invasion, Duran Duran. And we can't forget the phenomena that was the best-selling album of this decade and of all time. That was Michael Jackson's Thriller. You know, the one where we all learned the dance. I learned the dance. Did you learn the dance? This was the era of the high concept movies getting to be very popular. You know, the ones I'm talking about that are high action, easy to summarize in just a couple sentences, easy to market, and incredibly accessible. I'm talking about Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Top Gun, Alien, Predator, RoboCop, Terminator, Blade Runner, Good Morning Vietnam, and The Never-Ending Story. This is also the era of the rise of the teenage movie. I'm talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Pretty in Pink, The Breakfast Club, Dirty Dancing, and Footloose. We also get to see some awesome high-quality TV shows, including The Cosby Show, Saved by the Bell, Full House, Wonder Years, Roseanne, Star Trek The Next Generation with Picard, and also Mystery Science Theater 3000, The Golden Girls, Quantum Leap, and so many more. We also get to see a lot of animated TV shows still dominating in its field, and that's of course The Smurfs, Thundercats, Inspector Gadget, Alvin and the Chipmunks, DuckTales, Land Before Time, and of course at the very end of the decade, we start seeing animated shows be aimed at adults with the beginning of The Simpsons. So the highest grossing film for this decade is none other than E.T., the Extraterrestrial, followed very closely by Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones. The best-selling book of the decade is Clear and Present Danger by Tom Clancy. And that does it for our 1980s review. I'm sure I forgot some stuff, but let's get into the winners by year. Let's start off with 1980 with Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke. This follows Vanman Morgan through all of the technical, political, and economic obstacles that stand in the way of him completing his dream of building a 24,000-mile high space elevator. This one is full of a lot of science and really gets into the details. Then coming in 1981, we have Snow Queen by Joan Vinge, or Vinge. This book takes place on a world that is bipartisan politically and known as summer and winter. And to keep the peace, each side has agreed that one side will rule the planet for a certain set time of years and then relinquish control to the other side. And such alternating back and forth over the millennia. And in this one, winter's rule is coming to an end, and we follow a girl named Moon, who grows up in summer and goes through an epic identity crisis when she discovers that she is an illegal clone of the Winter Queen herself, whose desperate attempts to get a hold of Moon can only be thwarted for so long. Or can they? In 1982, we have Down Below Station by C.J. Cherryh. This one follows Captain Mallory, who is assigned to a remote space station named Pell, also nicknamed Down Below, as punishment for calling out one of her superior officers. Just as she gets there, a flood of refugees swamps the colony below the space station, just in time for a crisis that gets this tiny station involved in the war between the Independent Union and Earth's company. Captain Mallory must now navigate all the political and social complexities and root out all of the corruption to cement her authority quickly. But this is exactly the time when the natives on the planet below the station decide to rise up and rebel. And Captain Mallory's problems are just starting there. Coming in at 1983, we have Foundation's Edge by Isaac Asimov. This is book 4 in the trilogy and is definitely one that you should not read until you read the Foundation trilogy. We have our main character who voices his skeptical opinion that the second Foundation is indeed no longer present and gets more and more vocal with his opinions and is therefore exiled. He is given a secret mission, but still in his exile, and meets up with a historian to start a quest to find the mythic planet of Earth, all of humanity's origin, only to instead discover the mule's own home world, with a surprising twist and a tie-in to the Robot series. Then in 1984, we have Startide Rising by David Brin. This is the second book in a trilogy. This story takes place in a universe where no sentient being gains sentience without being uplifted by a patron race, and then is subservient to that patron race for many generations as a thanks to their patron. However, one mystery remains unknown, and that is, Who uplifted the human race? This story takes place in an era where humans have already uplifted several creatures, including dolphins and chimpanzees. The story begins with an exploration vessel named Streaker as it crash lands into a watery planet. Luckily, the Streaker is piloted by a crew of uplifted dolphins, and they are running from many alien races who are after their recent discovery. They found an abandoned fleet of ships that might just be belonging to the progenitors, and it might even lead to the question of whether or not the progenitors were the ones who uplifted humans or not. In 1985, we have the iconic Neuromancer by William Gibson. In a near-future dystopian Japan, we're following a man named Case, who's a low-life hacker whose last botched job got him rewarded by being unable to access the VR matrix any longer. Desperate to get back in, he decides to pick up a job by a woman named Molly, who is willing to reconnect him back into the VR world, but only if he completes a high-stake heist and hack job. But Case doesn't play well with others, and he digs in deeper, only to discover that the job was actually posted by a powerful AI known as Wintermute. And things get more convoluted from there. This is considered the foundational book of cyberpunk, and it is the book that coined the term cyberspace. Coming in 1986, we have Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. In this famous story, we start with a boy named Ender, who is the third child of a family of geniuses, and the government has plans for him. They draft him into a battle school on an orbiting satellite during a war with aliens known as the Buggers. Problem is, Ender is only 9 years old, and he must endure the classes, the practice arena, and more importantly, his fellow cadets, who don't handle jealousy well. With the help of some of his friends and his clever tactics, Ender climbs his way to the top, only to discover military secrets that will haunt him and humanity for many generations to come. Then in 1987, we have Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. This is the second book in the Enderverse. Without giving anything away, this book is many thousands of years after Ender's Game, but due to time dilation, Ender himself is still around and still reeling from the effects of what happened in the first book. He is seeking redemption, and as such has become something known as a speaker for the dead. Someone who speaks at funerals the truth, both the positive and the negative, about a particular person who died. And as such, he has accidentally created this religion around the dead. He is called to speak on a remote planet where the only human handler of a new intelligent race, that's right, we're talking second contact, known as the Pequeños, is brutally murdered. Ender and his AI companion Jane discover more than they bargained for when they get there to investigate the murder. This book covers so many different themes and is both a revenge and redemption tale as well as second contact. And asks the question, can humanity learn from our mistakes? Then in 1988, we have The Uplift War by David Brennan. This is the third and final book in the Uplift War trilogy. This is the same universe as Startide Rising and is the book right after. This book follows the point of view perspective of a uplifted chimpanzee and focuses on intergalactic politics. A bird-like alien race known as the Gubru blockade a human-inhabited planet, trying to pressure humans into giving information about the fleet that was discovered in the previous book, Startide Rising. And they also focus on our biggest weakness, the relatively newly uplifted chimps, walking the reader through the responsibilities of what it takes to be a patron race according to this alien civilization and what it means to be uplifted. Finally, we have our 1989 winner, Sci-Fi by C.J. Cherryh. This book was broken up into 3 different books, but is combined into one to win the Hugo. And in this story, we follow a handful of scientists on a city named Rizun in a future where genetic engineering is so advanced that we can write DNA the way that we write computer programs. And as such, we have a result of people named Ozzy. Ozzy are people who have been written for a specific skill set or specific purpose. And their fate has been taken out of the hands of chance and put into a scientist. Now, in this future, we also understand psychology and sociology to such an extent that people can be programmed in real time to learn, forget, or even feel differently about a particular subject by taking tape. Ozzy in particular are dependent on tape to know how to think or feel. In such a world, political power and the ability to manipulate others is everything. And the person who's best at it is a woman named Ariane Emery. That's who this story focuses on. She is both the villain and the victim in this story. And her life is essentially the soul of this story. It's an incredibly complex tale of power plays, manipulation, and betrayal. And that leads us in to the very next section, which is my favorite rankings of the 1980s Hugos. All right, you guys, so this decade was full of tons of firsts, and you can kind of see it reflected with a meeting of the old golden age sci-fi and a lot of the new science fiction that's coming of age. And I really felt that in this particular genre. Although I have to say, I didn't feel like there were some really big aha moments in a lot of these winners. I feel like a lot of them could be put into a bucket of they were good, they were worth reading, but kind of unmemorable. Things kind of seem to be getting just a little bit more fun, adventurous, but also less boundary pushing and just more entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that, but you definitely feel that in this decade a little bit more. One of the few rankings that I have that anyone who's listened to my channel will not be surprised on is coming in at number 10. We have Neuromancer by William Gibson. So you guys know that I read this book and I just personally didn't love it. It was a book that I have a particular set of hate for because I find Case to be a despicable human being.
I hate him.
Not only do I not love reading his story, but I hate seeing him destroy everyone's lives around him just because of some kind of selfish nature. While I definitely understand why this book won a Hugo, because it is definitely a foundational book in science fiction, it's not a fun one for me to read. Then coming in at number 9, I know this is going to be controversial, but remember this is just my personal taste. You can disagree.
I will.
Coming in at number 9, we have Down Below Station by C.J. Cherryh. This is a book that felt just bloated and overdone to me. The politics were just on and on and on, and the world building, I just didn't need to know all of the things that she talked about in this book. While looking at my summary, seems like a book I should really like. I did not love it. I definitely had to convince myself many times to not DNF this story, and I don't know if it's just because I was in a cranky mood, or maybe it's because I listened to this on the audiobook side, and I should have read it in a real physical copy, but I really didn't have a good time with Down Below Station. Coming in at number 8, as much as this kills me, we have Foundations of Paradise. I really love Arthur C. Clarke and his writing style and the comfy, cozy vibes that he produces, but Foundations of Paradise was just a glorified discussion about how to build a space elevator, and that's fine, but it's just not overly entertaining, and I didn't need it in my life, you know what I'm saying? Maybe at a certain point in my future, I will enjoy it more, but as of right now, it was fine. I finished it, but I just feel somewhat unmemorable about it. Coming in at number 7, we have The Uplift War by David Brin. This book was kind of disappointing, being that it was supposed to be the end, the trilogy. It's supposed to be the climax and give me all the answers that weren't covered in the first 2 books. And I have to say, it just let me down. It spent more time discussing politics and what it means to be a patron than it really did resolving a lot of the plot points that David Brin started.
It wasn't very satisfying.
I don't know how to explain it any other way. I still had a great time learning about the universe and having a fun time, but I didn't feel satisfied with the story because we didn't get a climax.
I feel full after the risotto.
I do know that there is a second trilogy, I believe, in this series, so maybe there'll be more answers there. I do plan to check it out. It's just not top of my TBR right now. Coming in at number 6, we have The Snow Queen. This book was definitely a science fiction book intended for fantasy readers. This book had almost every element of fantasy in it, except for magic. There were a lot of really cool, fun twists in it, and I really did enjoy the story, but I found it to be overall somewhat forgettable. And that's kind of why I haven't picked up the next couple in the series, even though I own them, because there's just so many other great stories to pick up. And that's not decreasing my love for Snow Queen, which is still worth a read, but it's definitely not genre pushing. And it doesn't wow me in any way. So it was just a fun story. So that means coming in at number 5, we have Startide Rising. This one was a little bit more action-packed. It was a little bit more fun than all of the other books in the trilogy. Although I do have to say, I think the first book was my favorite, which is probably the most unpopular opinion I have on the channel, I'm sure. Startide Rising was fun, but again, my biggest complaint is that we don't necessarily solve all the plot points, which wouldn't be a negative if we had solved them in the third book. Just saying. Instead, we didn't. So I have a lot of fun about Startide Rising. I think it was a very well-written book, and I had so much fun reading this trilogy, but there's a lot of problems within it, and so it's a little bit lower on my list. Coming in at number 4, we have Foundation's Edge. This was a book that I came in with high expectations because I absolutely adore the first trilogy of the Foundation series. I think I had the best buddy read of all time, and it just really was a transformative experience. I loved that trilogy. And I went into Foundation's Edge being overjoyed about being back to that universe. And instead, it was very dry and very plodding. And it was only the ending that saved this book for me and brought it up to my number 4 favorite Hugo Award winner of the 1980s. It's because it has to do with the tie-in for the Robot series. And that's all I'm going to give you. Now, you guys, the rest of these books, my top 3, are definite standouts. You guys, these are 3 books that are in like my top favorite science fiction book list of all time, and it's very difficult for me to decide which ones to put where. So I have decided on something, and it's going to be a little bit controversial. It's going to be controversial. I'm sorry. It's still my opinion. I'm still sticking with it. Coming in at number 3, we have Ender's Game. I love this story, and I think Ender is such a complex, really emotional character. There's so many interesting pieces to this story, but it's the number 3 for me. I love it! I love it! I love it! And I'll get into more of that a little bit later. Coming in at number 2, and this was hard for me, we have Cytine by C.J. Cherryh. This story is a hidden gem masterwork of manipulation, power plays, betrayal. I mean, holy crap. Like, this is Game of Thrones level manipulation in this story. And the amount of science and genetic engineering and psychology in this book was mind-blowing. But I do have to tell you, this first half of the book starts off with like a Senate room and lots of politics and people playing about a bill and talking about laws and all that stuff. It was very difficult to get into. But once you start to recognize that Cherry is putting all of those into place, so that way you understand the characters' motivations and who the big players are, then you get into the city of Razoon, and all of those things tended to matter. And the world building in this book is second to none. It was incredible. And unlike Down Below Station, the politics were done right. They really delve into why they matter and what they did to the characters that had them happen. And I'm still not really sure who the bad guy is, because holy crap, was there a really interesting role reversal in this story. Like, this is an unsung hidden gem. And it was incredible. And I had an incredible time with it. I do have to say, it is one that you cannot listen to on audiobook. You must read it. And you must read all 3 parts in one giant go. If you don't, I don't think you'll make it through the book. And I don't think you'll get the overarching picture that Cherry was trying to show. Just an opinion, but fair warning. Finally, coming in at number 1, we have still my reigning champion, all-time top 3 favorite books of all time, and that's Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. You guys, I don't know what this book doesn't have. It is Second Contact. Like, how many books do that? Not very many. Second Contact. It's a redemption story of a main character, but also of humanity as a whole. Like, wow, mind-blowing. It deals with all of the intentional little tiny nuances of characters' relationships, of someone's life, of all the different conspiracies and lies we hide behind, whether or not we're capable of moving forward, of learning from our mistakes, or do we make a worse mistake because we overcompensate or undercompensate? There are so many areas of juxtaposition in this story. The AI side story is just a subplot. What? And Ender himself seems to be an epic delivery method of what's going on in this story.
Wow, that's the best book I've ever seen.
You guys, I gotta tell you, Speaker for the Dead is so accessible, and it is just exactly what I want for my science fiction. I again say it is in my top 3 favorite science fiction books of all time, and those continuously change, and it continuously pops up as on top of the pile. It doesn't quite outdo Hyperion for me, but it is very good and very close. That does it for all of my 1980s Hugo Award winners. Yeah! What did you think? What is your ranking? You're gonna have to let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to check out my other decade Hugo winners. And until next time, I will see you in the next video.